Hello, Year 5. Welcome to your reading lesson for today. We're going to do something slightly different for reading this week, having gone through your papers, been able to identify some of the areas that we need to work on. So I'm going to recap on some PowerPoints linking to some of the skills that we need to revisit, and then I'm going to give you an activity to do at the end, okay? So for today we're going to be looking at identifying how information contributes to the meaning of the text. Now, this goes back to some of the 2 and 3 mark questions that you had in your test papers that we struggled with a little bit. So I'm going to recap the different type of question stems that come from this theme, and then you're going to have a go at reading an extract and having a go at some questions. So the 2 main elements for us to focus on are to identify and explain how information, narrative content is related and contributes to the whole meaning of text, and making comparisons. Now, the weakest skill I think we had was the first bit here about explaining how information is relevant and what it means. So our main focus to help with those 2 content domains that we're looking at is to explain how certain parts of the text build or change the overall message or meaning. So that tends to be your 2 mark questions where you make a point and then you find some evidence to explain it. When we look for making comparisons within text, that's looking at how characters or events within a story that are similar or maybe even different from each other, and looking at how one individual character or event can change the course of the story. Okay, tends to be some of the questions you find closer towards the end of the test papers. So let's go through and have a look at some of the different type of questions that we might find. Now, one of the more simple ones that we've probably seen before, this is where you have to draw lines to match each section to its main content. Now, this will tend to be when you have a text that might be set out in subheadings, and each one is clearly defined in terms of what the information is that's going to appear in each one. So here obviously we had the subtitles for the story, and then the idea of, well, what's that information about for each paragraph. You've then got this one here. So again, drawing the lines to match each part of the story, but it matches a specific quotation in the text. So what does each of the quotes then link it to? Is it linking it to the setting, the past events, the action, or the lesson of the story? So again, it tends to be that matching one here. Now, the one that we had in our test paper that threw some of you was this one. So this one is actually a sneaky one. It links to both parts of those 2 test domains. So first we've got find and copy the group of words on page 9 where Lord John's mood changes. So again, that's us finding evidence to prove it. And then here we have to explain, well, how has that person's mood changed? So that one is a sneaky one because it almost links to 2 of the main domains, okay? So let's have a look at each one of them in a bit more detail, okay? So we've got the main message one here. So this requires you to draw those lines to match them up to see which statement matches which part of the message. Now for this one, this is where it's really important to draw on your knowledge of synonyms. For example, the origin, meaning beginning or cause. Okay, so you'd be looking for the section which discusses the beginning of swimming or the English Channel. So here, when it says looking at the origin, where is it? So we've got a summary, we've got contrasting points, giving information about the origins. So you know, if we look at the origin of something, it's the start of something. So we know it's going to be one of those beginning paragraphs that discusses something. So that's really important to have that synonym knowledge there to be able to help you. If we have a look at this one, it's just similar context. So again, we've got the 4 quotations and the 4 links to it. If a quote says that would teach her ... we need to think, well, which part of the story does that link to? So when you think for your lessons, when I'm teaching you during a lesson, and a lesson is where there's an element of something to be learnt from it, okay? So again, that's using some of the key vocab and knowledge there. Well, hang on, that's asking you, there must be some form of teaching going on. Now, it's really key then to think there, well, hang on, well, how would you show the marker that you've changed your mind? So that would be one of those ones we'd have to look at making sure we're crossing out lines and matching them correctly. Okay, and then we have this one here. Okay, so this is the quote and discuss question. Okay, so this tends to break up 2 marks with this question, sometimes even 3 marks. Okay, now like I said at the beginning, it's sneaky because it actually links both of those content domains we're looking at the beginning. How does it change the context of the story? But equally, how does that change for a specific character that's changed from the beginning to the end of the story? Okay. So the types of questions that you might be asked then in this concept, and I think this is where it's quite difficult for some people, I think this is where some of you struggled, is there tends to be a second part of the question that you have to answer. So you might be asked questions where you compare one character to another. How are they different or how are they similar? That's usually going to be 2 marks. How are the settings within the story similar or different? Who has the author written the text for and why? So that's almost like your point and your evidence. Now, we haven't had a huge amount of experience with looking at point and evidence. Certainly working through into September, we're going to be looking a lot at our idea of our point, evidence, explain, and how we structure those questions. How has this character changed during the text? And that's a sneaky 2 mark question, because if there's an element that they've changed, you've got to describe them as being one way to start off with and a different way towards the end. So that's where you've got to look at evidence for how something's changed. That tends to be a 2 mark question. Compare how the characters react to this situation, who deals with it best. So again, that's your point. Well, who is it that reacts to it the best? What's the comparison between those characters? What is the most thought-provoking moment of the story? So that might be asking you for an opinion part of the story. So, to sum it up then, before I then let you have a go at your activity. So, what you've got to be able to do is prove your understanding, okay? So, you've got to sit there and think, well, what does Cassie the commentator help you do? What sort of questions might Cassie the commentator ask? And how can you make sure you get full marks on these commentator questions? So, I'm going to test you on that now, okay? I want you to have a go at doing some of these style questions on your own. So, I've sent you home the Raider's Peril story. I've only sent you home the first 2 extracts. I think when we look at some of the other skills for this week, I think it's exactly the same extract that we're looking at, just a different skill that we're going to be focusing on. Obviously, we did a lot of the Raider's Peril stuff, and we worked during lockdown as well. But there's lots of different elements that we could go with this story. So have a read of the story, and I want you to have then have a go at answering the questions and pay attention to the number of marks that it is that it's looking for. Okay, and then we will start going over this more in depth when we look at this next year. All right, good luck.